auditeurs, je nous annonce en deuxième segment émission ça, que nous allons gagner en anglais, avec d'une part invité spécial que nous gagnons qui sortit dans Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services, Ruth George, and my brand new hostess, Laurie Lucien. Ruth, welcome on Télécréole.
Thank you.
Thanks
for having me.
You are very welcome. Laurie?
Hi, so my first question is, could you please tell us a little bit about what the Mayor's Office for Neighborhood Services does?
Well, the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services is composed of different community coordinators, and we basically assist residents in facilitating and receiving neighborhood services, making sure that they are able to communicate with city agencies for different programming, or just, information, education. We do a lot of that. I also do quite a bit when it comes to like business development, housing development, and my role in that is making sure that residents are aware of what's going on in the neighborhood. They have access and they have a voice, and and what's impacting their neighborhood.
Now, when you mention services, what could those services be?
Oh, it's an array. It just depends. If it's someone, we're talking about the Haitian population, the Office of New Bostonians offers like clinical hours where you can speak to an attorney about immigration issues, making sure the Office of New Bostonian is responding to their call if they haven't heard from them, making sure our community knows that that service is even available. If it's for, it depends on what it is. If it's for housing, is making sure that they have the right contacts in BHA depending on what their housing issue is. It can go from that to, let's say there's a new program the city is offering and a neighborhood association wants more information on it, like for example Vision Zero, and they want to know how does that impact our neighborhood.
Vision Zero.
Vision Zero, yes. It's the mayor's initiative to basically remove all kind of fatalities when it comes to pedestrians and vehicles and biking, and it's basically trying to figure out how do we slow down speeding in the neighborhoods. And we already have 2 pilot communities that we're doing it in, and I know my community, Mattapan, was also one of them that reached out and said, can you give us more information? And I just make sure they get that information, and if they decide to apply for it, I make sure that that they have the right contacts and that Boston Transportation Department follows up with them.
Is it a service that you've heard of, Laurie?
I have not heard of the service in particular through this program. I have heard of similar services through other nonprofits, so this is good to know. So you mentioned something about business development. What aspect of that do you actually do? Because I know that Black women are some of the most one of the growing groups of entrepreneurs in America.
That they are, and Mayor Walsh realizes that. He recently released a new initiative for small businesses in the neighborhood, and it's coming through the Office of Small Business Economic Development, and the purpose of that is to target small businesses, and as you know, small businesses are a huge infrastructure in the city of Boston. Quite a bit of our population is employed by small businesses, so those mom and pops, they matter, and immigrant population, when it comes to entering the business development matters, especially women too. The city realizes that. So this new small business office that's going into neighborhoods will offer opportunities to young entrepreneurs, all entrepreneurs, and it specifically also is targeting women so that we have more women coming into the workforce, not just working, but starting their own business ventures.
Now, one of the reasons why we also wanted to have you as a guest, it was to introduce or discuss promote this whole concept of Imagine Boston that started when again?
It started since last year, yes.
Last year, I remember that.
We started the visioning sessions.
Can you give us a sense of what's the concept?
So Mayor Walsh introduced Imagine Boston, and his concept is that the community will have an opportunity to enter the conversation on the first citywide plan in the past 50 years. So in the past 50 years, we have not looked at Boston and its infrastructure and its growth. We, of course, have looked at statistics that they come, annually, but we have not looked at, as our growth continues, how are we going to look like in the next 15 years, and how are we going to sustain this city that has, great growth, but then has some challenges too with the growth. So it's a shared vision for Mayor Walsh, and he wants us we've started these visioning sessions in the neighborhood, sitting down and speaking with residents one-on-one, candidly like this, how do you like your neighborhood? What makes your neighborhood unique and great? how can we as a city improve? So it's looking at neighborhoods individually, but then looking at it collectively, how it impacts all residents that live in the city of Boston. So we started doing these visioning sessions, not just within neighborhoods, but within ethnic groups. Before, 50 years ago, when they did the previous citywide plan, it was never done like this. It wasn't innovative like this. It was more of City Hall kind of regulated what our city is going to look like in 50 years.
Quickly, I know about Boston with its particular geographic configurations. When we talk about neighborhoods, are there names that can be named, or how should people or the viewers understand the concept of neighborhoods in Boston? So
for neighborhoods in Boston, and I never knew this existed until I lived here. In Florida, if you're like from Orlando, you're just from Orlando. But in Boston, it's like, no, I'm from Back Bay, no, I'm from Mattapan, I'm from Dorchester. So it's those kinds of neighborhoods. And there's a uniqueness in all of them. If you drive through the city of Boston, how one neighborhood looks is drastically different. Like I've been in Mattapan, and then I go up to Dorchester, and it's a whole different world. You know, when it comes to just the vibrancy, when it comes to accessing certain services, it's just so very different that make it really unique. So when we say neighborhoods, we're talking about those kind of climates.
Is that your experience also, Lori?
Oh yeah, it's very bifurcated. I think the city's it's grouped, and people who share certain views and ideas tend to live around the same areas, which also contributes to a lot of racial and ethnic segregation in the city.
Good. Now, you've been conducting those listening sessions. Are you the only one doing that, or is there a team that spread across Boston?
No, there is a team that is working on it, and the Imagine Boston team has been doing it throughout the entire city of Boston. So it started with visioning sessions that have started since last fall and that have went up into the spring, and now we're into the second phase. So this is a 2-year planning phase, and it's a 2-year planning phase not just for the team that's working on it, but for the neighborhood. So we're doing this by, of course, doing the visioning sessions, but we've now started feedback sessions. And these sessions are now saying, hey, we sat down, we met with you, this is where you saw opportunity for growth. Tell us if we're right. Tell us if we're on the right track. So we did a recent feedback session in Mattapan, and where we pulled out all the maps. We pulled out a huge map. It was really, to me, it was a lot. Like, oh my gosh, Boston, though so small, is so spread out. And we looked at the entire city of Boston, and we, as residents and as a neighbor coordinator, we looked at, you know, where do we live? Where do we play? And by play, we mean, you know, where do you go to church? Where do you eat? Where do you socialize? And we wanted to know, where do you work? And the reason we're doing this is we want to see where residents live versus where they work. That's letting us know what neighborhoods need opportunity for a job, for workforce development. We're looking at where a lot of residents live. That may let us know that area is really dense and we probably don't have much room for housing there. So it's giving residents a real opportunity to be a part of the engagement so that they can talk about where they would like to see growth in their neighborhoods, but also in the entire city of Boston. I think it's a really good concept because it allows residents to really see, you know, sometimes we live real separate lives, and it's not until we're in one room we start seeing greater issues. So I think the sessions are allowing residents to have a community conversation, and it's allowing us to really see where there's opportunity for growth in the neighborhood.
So I know that from conversations with certain politicians that affordable housing in Boston is a huge issue. Is that what you're seeing as well, and what other issues are you finding in these sessions? So through the work that they have been doing, they have assessed specific goals that they have derived from the visioning sessions, which are providing a quality of life for residents, driving economic growth, investing in infrastructure and open space and culture. So through these 4 concepts, we've been able to get the information from the visioning session and kind of bring that out to the community, and housing is definitely one of them. Since 2010 into 2014, we saw 6% growth in population. With that, we had 45,000 more residents living in the city of Boston. The city of Boston isn't that large. But with that, we also saw a growth in employment that covered that, which was great. But Boston's continuing to grow. We're looking at the stats that say within the next 15 years, we could have almost 1 million people living here, which is huge. And you know, some things that are driving that is our professional development, our education system, our healthcare, you know, are driving so many groups into Boston. And because of that, we are facing a major issue with housing. And
across the city, residents are talking about it, from homeowners to residents that are just that are renting. You know, housing is an issue. So the mayor realizes that, and we understand that we need to have at least 53,000 more housing units in the city, at least, to kind of accommodate that, the growing population. We've started that through the Neighborhood Home Initiative, and this basically is looking at empty parcels of land that are owned by the city and building housing on it. Not just building housing, in some neighborhoods it's building mixed-use properties. So areas that don't have commercial property that need that. When developers are coming in and say, hey, I want to buy that lot, the mayor's like, that's great that you want to put commercial, but we also need housing. So you're only going to get that land if we can get some housing in there too. So it's kind of having that real kind of conversation, and those housing markets are looking at a range. They're not just looking at market rents, we're also looking at affordable, we're looking at medium, and looking at the city's AMI, and so kind of seeing, you know, what that would look like depending on the individual.
Okay.
We are going for a short break, and then we'll be back again. Our guest is Ruth George from the Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services, and happy to have my co-host here today, Laurie Lucien, on her very first show. Short break, and we'll be back on Tête-à-Tête sur Télécréole.
HAU, Haitian Americans United, à tout partenaire lancé gros invitation pour mois de mai, qui c'est mois héritage haïtien. Trois gros événements qui toujours marqué communauté, montée drapeau devant Boston City Hall, vendredi 13 mai. Parade unité haïtien dimanche 15 mai. Ak célébration héritage nous jeudi 26 mai. Dans l'occasion ça, c'est tout élève l'école, à université, business, groupe jeunes, membres l'église, médias, à toute l'autre organisation qui a rassemblé comme New Self-Force vendredi 13 mai de midi à 2h PM pour spécial 21e montée drapeau avec fanfare Boston devant City Hall, cap dédié à Maître Idessa, défunt détective Yves d'Ambreville. Puis devant, dimanche 15 mai, dans 16e parade Unité Haïtien, cap quitté Mattapan Square à Mattapan pour aller finir sur Talbot là. Samblier jeudi 26 mai pour 11e célébration héritage haïtien dans State House de Iné pour 2h30 PM avec sénateur Linda Dorchester. Relais HAU dans 617 417 84 21 ou bien 617 298 29 76 pour plus d'informations.
Nous attendons, mais je produit là encore que nous attendons tout haïtien, tout compatriote, toute famille, nous attendons tout que inviter les amis dans la communauté haïtienne, ainsi que les amis étrangers pour venir participer avec nous dans la part de l'unité haïtienne qui a été faite dans le mois de mai. Pas oublier, c'est deux grands événements qui ont toujours fait. Il y a d'abord monter du drapeau qui a été fait du côté de City Hall, et ensuite il y a une parade qui a été faite dans Mattapan Square pour monter arriver du côté de Talbot Avenue. Encore une fois, c'est un événement. Côté, nous avons besoin des dizaines de milliers d'Haïtiens. Nous avons Boston Globe qui a rapporté 5 000, nous avons Boston Globe qui a rapporté 15 000. Parfois, la pluie compte tomber, nous comptons dans 7 000. Eh bien, nous avons là pour Haïtiens commencer. Fait qu'on est que entre eux-mêmes et les amis, pour porter 20 000 Haïtiens viennent marcher de Mattapan Square, rive Talbot Avenue. Pas oublier, lorsque quantité de monde est présent dans la parade là, lorsque Haïtiens prennent une série de promotions, advocacy, demandes au niveau politique, au niveau économique, quitte l'été au niveau ville Boston, the City of Boston, quitte l'été au niveau de State of Massachusetts, et bien il y a plus de chances que officiels yo tendez lorsque vous avez une quantité de centaines des milliers d'Haïtiens qui sont dans la rue, qui peuvent participer à la parade. Pas oublier tout qu'on vient marcher dans la parade ça, et c'est si vous connaissez un pile d'Haïtiens qui viennent marcher là-dedans que vous allez venir même tout porter figure et leur demander telle priorité qui suppose réaliser. Il a pu répondre à lui-même. Donc, je viens de faire prêcher avant de retourner à inviter. Et Laurie, I thought that we had some questions that we wanted to follow up with Ruth.
Okay, so we wanted to know what in particular you saw that was coming out of the Haitian community in these feedback sessions?
So the very first one, in regards to the Haitian community we did, was a visioning session. And in that visioning session, we spoke with the Haitian community. We actually met with Haitian American United. And I felt like that was a really great group to meet with because you're pulling from so many demographics. We had people that come from, all walks of professions there, from students to professionals. And at this meeting, there was, a real need for housing. There was a real need for entrepreneurship. More than housing, I want to say, it was entrepreneurship.
Yeah, that came out pretty strongly.
That came out very strongly, where they felt that there needed to be more entrepreneurship opportunities for the immigrant population, for women, for people of color. And I do really believe that the Mayor's New Initiative is actually going to address some of those needs. But I would say from the visioning session, that was what I heard the most, was that, and them also talking about a particular community, Mattapan, that they felt had a lot of Haitian residents, and they felt as if there should be more services and access to certain agencies in the city for that Haitian community. And we just talked about, equity, how to access these things, and education. Education was also a really huge one with such a large immigrant population, making sure that the Boston public school system currently and in the future really had services and programs to help students that were dealing with things with like interrupted education, English as a second language, and dealing with housing issues in regards to education when it comes to having students who are homeless. We actually have students who do not have somewhere to stay when they go home in the evenings, and how that affects their education. And so I would say those are some things we took from the Haitian listening session. And through the feedback that we also had quite a few Haitian residents that came out to the Mattapan one, and they also talked about the community, the neighborhood, and what they would like to see, more, just a focus on schools, a focus on, of course, housing. I feel like I can't say this enough,
And I know that I was there, part of this session. So it happened in Mattapan. In your particular role, is the focus mainly in Mattapan for conducting those particular listening sessions? And do you have a sense how Haitians who might not live in the Mattapan area might be as well motivated or integrated into other sessions that will take place beyond Mattapan?
So in my role, I mostly focus in assisting with the ones that are in Mattapan. I have helped with one with another Caribbean organization. I helped facilitate that one. I also attended and helped facilitated one in Roxbury. So I've been kind of in and out of the different neighborhoods. I found that this has been really helpful in understanding different needs and understanding how budget kind of impacts those needs and the different perspectives of what a need is to that neighborhood. I would say in regards to the Haitian community, when we have the one with HEU, not everyone necessarily lived in Boston, but they worked in Boston. They had family in Boston. And I told them, well, this impacts you too. This is how you kind of have a voice in this. If you're letting us know, I may live in Canton or Brockton or Stone, but I'm driving all the way into Boston to go to work. That's letting us know that employment is important in our city. Job growth is important. Workforce development is important. And we've tapped into something that maybe other cities haven't, and that's why we're drawing a population into our city.
Right. I picked up that there are a lot of Haitians who live in the suburbs or outside of Boston who happen to be homeowners in Boston.
Yes, you do.
So clearly many of those discussions will impact their taxes,
that it will.
Cleaning of the streets, and many other issues or safety issues that were also raised at this meeting, as I remember.
Yes, there was. There was quite a bit of discussion about public safety. And I think quite a bit of that was focused on educating our students about public safety too, giving them the right tools to fight against peer pressure, violence, and things that we don't talk about possibly mostly at home that parents would like to see the school system kind of get more involved in. And I agree in regards to the housing and how it affects access. So it's really important for residents to be engaged in these kind of conversations, not just in Imagine Boston, but when development's happening in their community in general. As someone that facilitates community meetings, and I facilitate a Butters meeting, and when talking about Mattapan that has a large immigrant population, often the immigrant population isn't there. Even if you advertise it in radio, even if you advertise it throughout the community, you'll see certain leaders that are there, but the population itself not well represented. And to me, that's a major issue, and it is a challenge that the city is trying to address. And I think by having a Haitian liaison, that's one way of trying to, address those infrastructure challenges. But I think it's a greater issue, especially when you're talking about a community that came from one country and migrated into another.
I'm going to pause here as our time is literally up to say that we may have to bring you back to address this very big elephant on the table. Why, if we are talking about those issues that are going to impact Haitians, they are not actually showing up at those meetings. Laurie, par contre, un dernier mot pour nous conclure?
No, that's it.
D'accord.
Thank you so much for being here.
Of course, thank you for having me.
Merci encore à Ruth George qui soutient Mayor's Office of Neighborhood Services pour le deviner parler du concept Imagine Boston. Moi, je suspecte que nous allons gagner là pour l'autre programme côté nous allons parler bon Jean créole non, ça c'est une introduction pour nous café de issus ça qui besoin de discuter puisque encore une fois, il y a des signalés que Haïtiens pas participer assez dans la réunion ça qui fait exactement pour mettre voix dehors pour influencer les décisions qui vont prendre dans City Hall. C'est avec nous Charles Lucien et Laurie Lucien pour notre édition de Tête à Tête sur Télécréole. Restez branchés, n'a pas fini dans 2 semaines.